Hi, I'm Debbie, and this is Book and BuJo, where I talk about all things books, bullet journals, and stationery. Thank you so much for joining me for my February stats and wrap-up. For all of those book nerds out there like myself, we will start out with some stats. I will scooch over here so I have a place to show you my stats. We'll start with books read. We're 14. I read 5,812 pages and I listened to 170.2 hours of audiobooks. Some of those were immersive, so I was reading physically as well as listening to them audibly. I did buy 3 books in February. One of them was The Girl in the Moon, which is the continuation of the Backlist book club that we will be reading in April and May. I bought Stillness is Key by Ryan Holiday, as that was on sale, and I love Ryan Holiday's writing. And the last one is a pre-order, so I technically purchased it this month, but I won't be charged until it actually comes out, which is later this year, and that is Wrath of the Triple Goddess by Rick Riordan, which is a continuation of the Percy Jackson series. And I did purchase all 3 of those books through Amazon. I did check out 9 books from my library, including using Libby and Hoopla for audiobooks. And I had 0 rereads for February. Star ratings, I had a 0 1-star, which is amazing. I had 1 2-star, unfortunately. I had 2 3-stars, 9 4-stars, and 2 5-star reads. So overall, even though I had a 2-star in there, overall, it was a really good reading month. So I did read an average of 415 pages per book and 200 pages per day. That included the immersive reading for audiobook and pages read. And then an average of 12.15 hours of audiobooks per book and 5.86 hours per day. I'm pretty excited about my average rating per book this month because it's actually 4.1. Some of the previous months it's been like 3.89, which I mean overall is still really good, but it's nice to have an average reading month of over 4 stars. My shortest book was 141 pages, and that was The Book of Dragons, and my longest book was Kingfall, which was 818 pages. That was also my longest audiobook at 29.97 hours. And my shortest audiobook, technically the audiobook is actually longer, but I only listened to 2.5 hours of it because I read the majority of the book physically, and that was The Last Hero by Terry Pratchett. And that is the 27th. Yes, the 27th book in the Discworld series. So I read 1 illustrated novel, which was The Last Hero by Terry Pratchett, and I read 12 standard novels and 1 anthology. For my audience, I read 10 adult books, 3 YA, and 1 children's book. So again, 9 of them were library books between Hoopla, Libby, and my physical library, and 5 of my owned TBR books, which is amazing because that's 5 more books that I own that I can cross off the list. I started 4 series. I continued with 6 series, and I did finish 1 series, which is great. I read 3 indie books, and the other 11 books were traditionally published. Page count breakdown. So between 0 and 199 pages, I read 2 books. Between 200 and 299, I had 1 book. From 300 to 399, I did have 3 books. 400 to 499 pages, I had 5 books. 1 book between 500 and 599 pages, 1 book between 6 and 699, and 1 book over 700 pages. So I had a pretty good page count in February for my books. Out of my 2 5-star books, my top book of the month is definitely Kingfall by David Estes, and that's the first book in the Kingfall history series. So good. I highly recommend David Estes for the high epic fantasy. He does such a good job. My worst book, unfortunately, my least favorite, was The Book of Dragons by Edith Nesbit. That was my 2.5 star. It was okay. Definitely things I didn't enjoy about it. So I did participate in 4 book clubs in February and 3 readalongs. I read 1 nonfiction, 1 romance, 2 classics, and all of the rest were fantasy. I read 1 book physically. I read 1 ebook, and then 2 audiobooks. The rest of my books were all mixed. So I had my other 10 books were mixed media. 7 of those were combination of physically reading and listening audibly. The other 3 were reading my ebooks while listening audibly. That is it for my stats. I definitely completed my February TBR, my book clubs, and my read-alongs. So I was very happy with the results for February. Now, the books. First book I read in February was The Aenid by Virgil, and this was written in 20 BC, and I had thought, since I just finished the Iliad in January and I definitely enjoyed it, I should just go right ahead with that same genre, writing style, the feeling of it and everything, and get into Virgil and read the Aenid. Well, I did not enjoy this quite as much as I did the Iliad. This one is quite a bit shorter. It's not a huge page count, but just it was a lot. And the ebook I had, I also had it physically from the library, and I listened to it audibly. They were all 3 different translations, so I couldn't read along while I was listening at all with either of the ebook or the physical book, so that made it a little bit harder as well. Yeah, so I still enjoyed it. I gave it, I think, 3.5 stars. So it was still good information. Like it was enjoyable, but I got bored. The writing was a little too full of prose and poetic and flowery kind of language, which always is a little harder for me to enjoy and translate in my brain into something. But it was good. If you like classic Roman Greek mythology, you would probably enjoy this, but if you're not into that very classical writing, so back in 20 BC, it's an older book. So you may want to read some newer translations of it than I did. Yes, so moving on. The next book I read, while I was listening to the Aenid, I was also reading on my ebook The Book of Dragons by Edith Nesbit. And this one started out okay. I think an illustrated version would be better, to actually get a physical version that has the pictures of the dragons and all the drawings and everything. I think that would help with the stories a little bit. But then I got to, it was either the 2nd or 3rd story, and they started with one of those things that I hate in children's books. The example I give is, if you don't brush your teeth, no one will love you. And that kind of thing that just irks me so much. Do not kill a child's self-esteem by something so mundane as that. There are so many other ways, like, hey, your teeth are going to fall out if you don't brush your teeth. I mean, that could actually happen if you never brush your teeth. You could have a lot of teeth issues, but that doesn't mean no one's going to ever love you. So I had a really hard time enjoying this book just because there was a couple of stories. It was more than one story that had that in it. And so that kind of killed the enjoyment for me. I did find the audiobook for this as well. And just to speed up my reading of this, I listened to the audiobook for the last couple of stories just to get through it. So this was my 2.5 star read for the month. The stories were fun, they were interesting, the children saved the day. I think as a child I would have enjoyed these stories a lot more than I do as an adult, and I would be very choosy which stories out of this book I would read if I had children. Ones I would read to them. I would definitely not read them all, so I would read them first before you read them to your children. So the next book I read was Bands of Mourning by Brandon Sanderson, and this is the 3rd book in the Mistborn Era 2 series, and I love this book. I really enjoy the series. I like the sarcastic humor of it, and just the fun steampunk Wild West kind of vibes. It's very fun. I like Wax's character, but I love Wayne. Love him. Maurice is great, and Steris. I love Steris. She is probably my favorite character. I love it that practical, no nonsense, let's plan ahead and figure things out before we jump on in. I love that she has such a main role in this book. That type of character. So much fun. 4.5 stars on that one. The next book I read was The Last Hero by Terry Pratchett, and this one is all about, it's technically a Rincewind book, but it also focuses on Cohen the Barbarian, and I love Cohen. He is so much fun. Just this super old warrior barbarian dude and all of his friends going out for one last hurrah, one last trek out there and mission, and just it's just so much fun. And I love that the librarian makes an appearance because he's another of my favorite characters, and I just love Rincewind's character. Reminds me a lot of the type of character that is Eeyore in the Winnie the Pooh series. It's just super fun, like, well, I guess I'm gonna have to do this even though I don't want to, and I'm probably gonna get hurt and stuff's gonna happen. I don't want to volunteer, but here we go, here I am. He's just that type of character, and it's so much fun. The next book I read was The Girl in the Mountain by Mark Lawrence, and this is the second book in the Book of the Ice series, and this was for the Backlist book club with Covers with Cassidy, and I really like this series. I definitely like it more than I do the Book of the Ancestor. I don't know if I feel like it's a little bit faster paced and you move just a little bit along, and there's less of a learning curve, I guess, because if you've read the Book of the Ancestor, then some of this you kind of already know, so you're not necessarily learning it for the first time, although you don't need to read that series in order to read this one, but I think it does help with your understanding a little bit more, and you get a little bit more depth behind it. But there are a few twists and turns, and the ending is setting yourself up really well for that third book, and I can't wait to read that one in April. The next book I read is The Amazing Maurice and His Educated Rodents, which is the 28th book in the Discworld series. This one was a fun book. It's more geared towards middle grade and YA than it is for adult, like the rest of the Discworld series, but it's still pretty enjoyable. I gave it 3.5 stars. It was a quick and easy read. So we have a talking cat that brings together his educated rodents and this young man to go into different towns and kind of scam the people into making some money. And as they come into a new town, they find that things are just a little bit different here, and maybe their scheme isn't going to work quite so well because there's already a racket in town. Next up was my first 5-star read for the month, and that was The Lost Metal by Brandon Sanderson, and it's the 4th and final book so far in the Mistborn Era 2 series. The ending of this book, I think, was just beautiful and also frustrating at the same time. So there's one character that I held in esteem and really liked in previous books, and they kind of came down a few notches for me in this book. And you know, it's written that way. You're supposed to feel something about this character, but I like how it kind of brings the Cosmere books together in this one. But my favorite characters are still Wayne and Steris. I just love them. Again, I really like Wax, I really like Maurice and all of the other characters, but Wayne and Steris just have my heart in the series. I just love them. We'll move on to the next book, which is The Burning Maze, and it's the 3rd book in the Trials of Apollo series by Rick Riordan. Now, I do like the Trials of Apollo series, but I don't like it quite as much as the other books in this series, and I'm not quite sure why. Haven't been able to put my finger on it and put those thoughts into, or those feelings into words yet. I thoroughly enjoy them, but not quite as much. There's something missing in them, I feel, that's in some of the other books that's not in this one, which is weird because, I mean, the humor's still there, the bonding between characters is still there, good plot lines, storylines, all of that, the atmosphere is all still there, the writing style's good, but I'm just not connecting to Lester Papadopoulos / Apollo as much as I do to a lot of the other characters, the demigods in the other books, and I don't know why. I do have to say, though, that The Burning Maze is my favorite of the 3 Trials of Apollo books I've read so far, so that's promising. So I'm hoping it's going to end really well with the 4th book. I feel like in this one, the storyline is finally coming together, and we're starting to see where it's going. And we also have cameos from Jason and Piper this time, where last time we had Leo in the second book, which is fun. And the first book, of course, had Percy in it. And I'm not sure if I liked the dynamics with Piper and Jason and Lester in there as much, but I still overall liked this book the best out of the series. Next book is Butcher and Blackbird by Bryn Weaver, and that is the first book in the Ruinous Love series. This one was interesting. It's basically two serial killers that kill other serial killers. So we have Butcher and we have Blackbird, and that's kind of like their serial killer names, what the media has named them. And they each kind of do their own thing, but they both go after other serial killers. They meet unexpectedly and in an interesting way, and then this competition kind of ensues. Well, we'll sort of work together, but in competition. So here's the new serial killer we want to go after. Which one of us is going to get them first, kind of thing. And I love their dynamics. The humor is fun. I do have to say, although it was written really well, I feel like the steamy scenes went on a few chapters too long for me. I mean, it was realistic and whatever, but I think I just wanted to get back to the storyline. Like, the story was interesting enough that I was like, okay, that's nice there. Yeah, and let's get into the rest of the story. I want to find out what happens. And I think that's probably why I was like, let's just move on. Because they weren't written like cringy or anything like that. But I just wanted to get back to the story. So that was my weird take on that. I'm sure most people loved the rest of it. But I just wanted to get back to the storyline because it was interesting and I really liked the characters, and the twists that are in there here and there are just super fun. So I gave that one 4 stars. Book number 10 was Say Goodbye to Illness by Devi S. Namboodirpad, and she is the doctor. She's a doctor, chiropractor, and acupuncturist, and she is the one who discovered the NAAT, Namboodirpad Allergy Elimination Treatment, and has helped thousands of people eliminate their allergies, food allergies, nature allergies, chemical, environmental, all of those type of allergies. And this treatment has helped me with 10 different allergies that I had so far. I have many, but there's now 10 things that are now gone for good, and I'm able to enjoy those things now, which is amazing. And that includes eggs and pistachios and coffee and corn. So those are some of the allergies that I've had treated and now do not have issues with them, which is amazing and such a blessing. So the book, of course, was written back in the 90s. It definitely needed one more full edit of the book and maybe one more proofread, but the information is still easy to understand, even though some of the sentence structures are a little odd. It's still, the point gets across very easily, and it was easy to read and had a lot of amazing information. I did read the 1993 edition, so if you find a later edition that has been proofread again and all of that, gone through another edit, it would probably be easier to read and you wouldn't have some of those issues. But I do highly recommend this book if you have allergies or if you know of anyone who has a lot of allergies that affect their lives. It's a great read. Next up was my random book because I was out of ebooks and I wanted to read another one. Since I was just listening to audiobooks at that time, I needed something to read at night before going to bed and during my lunch break. So I picked up my final book for the Our Fantasy Bingo, and that was I, Angel by J.C. Andrzejewski, and this is the first book in the Angels of LA series. And this was very interesting. The main character is intriguing. I want to find out more about his life and how he went through this change, because he definitely didn't ask to become an angel, and all of a sudden here it is. And by day he's a PI, private investigator in Hollywood area, and by night he fights demons as an angel. And it's very, very interesting. So one night while he's following this demon, he ends up saving an actress who's also somewhat of a socialite. And later on the next day, he ends up seeing her again, and she wants to hire him to protect her and her roommate, who is also an actress, and her roommate's boyfriend, who is an actor. And then interesting dynamics between all 4 of those characters come from there. And Also, the main character who is Dags Jordan. He has a high school friend, sort of friends in high school. They knew of each other, but she is a police officer. And so he has interesting interactions with her as he's trying to explain how he left the scene of this poor actress trying to be kidnapped by this guy who's actually a demon, and he as an angel is fighting him without revealing the angel and demon thing to the police officer or the actress, and it's just kind of a fun little mystery. I did give that one 4 stars, and I am definitely intrigued enough to move on to the next book. The next book was The Path of Daggers, which is the Wheel of Time, book number 8 for the Wheel of Time read-along with Sandra from Got a Thing for Things. And I enjoyed it. This is supposed to be one of the first books in the slog, where it starts to get really slow and slumpy for most people. I didn't find it to be that bad. I think part of it is going into it knowing it was going to be really slow, and most people kind of get bored with it. So going into it knowing that, I didn't find it too bad. So as long as you kind of go into these next few books, kind of books 7, 8, 9, 10 area, knowing they're going to be slow, then it's doesn't seem quite as bad, at least to me. And I did give that one 4 stars. It is a little slow, but I think there's enough in there to keep you interested. So you still have character development, you have some interesting things going on, there's still some battles, and it's more of like not really backstory, but like digging in more to the story of each little storyline that's happening throughout Wheel of Time. You get a little bits and pieces from all of those, which I think is probably creating more depth and less movement. So that's why it feels a lot slower. And of course, The Wheel of Time is by Robert Jordan. The next book I read is continuing with my book clubs, and that is A Little Hatred, which is the first book in the Age of Madness series by Joe Abercrombie. And I loved this book. 4.5 stars on this one. And this is for the Catch-Up Book Club with Becca and the Books. So this is set a decade or two, I don't know, 10 to 30 years, somewhere in there, I'm guesstimating, from the First Law trilogy. And so you're getting some of the descendants, so like the kids and other relatives from the characters that are in the First Law series, which is super fun. You still have a lot of familiar names that you recognize from the First Law world, which keeps you kind of intrigued and wanting to know more, and like what happened to these people, and did they get married, did they have kids, did something happen, what happened to them. You kind of find little nuggets of that in this book, and it was great. And even without reading that, it was still really interesting, the storylines that are happening with this next generation. My last book of the month was Kingfall by David Estes, which was my highest rated book for the month. I love this series. It's such a great start to the series. Now, you don't have to have read the Fate Marked series, which is a 5-book series by David Estes. They are both set in the same world, but they're on different continents, and I don't think it's the same time period either. I think Kingfall is a certain amount of time after Fate Marked, but there are some Easter eggs in Kingfall to characters that are at least descendants of some type from the characters that are in this book. And so I recognize some of the names. They make mention to the Tattooed, which is pretty big storyline in Fate Marked series. Now, of course, you don't need to know any of that to understand what's happening in this one, but it's those little Easter eggs that are in there that are just so much fun. The characters in here are very interesting, and it's intriguing. I can't wait to see what's going to happen with them. So at the beginning, there's a couple of characters that are introduced that I'm like, oh my gosh, this is my favorite character so far. And then by the middle of the book, you're like, oh my gosh, I'm not sure, I don't know about this character. Like, what's happening with this character? And then by the end, you're like, what is happening? But then there's other characters that come through that you're just like, oh, I love these people. These characters are amazing, and they're pretty steady throughout. And others, you got the ups and downs and twists and turns, like what is happening? And it's so interesting. I cannot wait to see what happens with the rest of the series. David Estes knows how to write a world so that it's It's intriguing, the atmosphere is there, you get some character development. And I love that he starts each chapter. So like part 1 has, we'll say like 6 chapters in it. And at the part 1 section, he actually writes, okay, these are the characters that have a POV in this section. And each chapter then has a heading that shows which POV you're going to get in that chapter, which is really cool. I love that. And especially if you're someone who really doesn't like a character or doesn't like what they're doing and you just want to skip them and move on to somebody else, it makes it really easy to do that. And if you miss something, be like, oh, I guess I need to go back to that person. Or if you've read the book and you just want to go back through and say you want to read all of the Samson chapters, like all of everything from his POV, it's super easy to go back and do that and get more of a timeline, easier, continuous timeline by reading all of the sections that are from Samson's POV. So I love that he does that. And at the end of each of his books, he has backstory on specific characters. So he'll take 3 or 4, maybe 5 or 6, typically around 4 characters that he gives some kind of backstory to. Sometimes it's not yet necessarily a character that is a main POV in the book. It's someone that's just kind of mentioned, and then he gives a backstory to them. And it's just creating such depth, not only in that character, but also in the world and the story, the plot line that's going to be going forward into the next book, without giving away spoilers necessarily for any of them. So that's one thing I just love. He's great with his characters, his world building, the atmosphere, the storyline, everything. Just an all-around good high epic fantasy writer. Check it out. Favorite book of the month. Now for book clubs. For a quick recap for the book clubs, for the Book and BuJo book club, and you can check out the link to our book club down in the description box. Down in the description box below, I'll have a link to Fable, where we're talking about the Kingfall histories. And this is the book for February and March. So if you haven't read it yet, there's still time to pick it up and give it a read and join the discussion down in Fable. So I did read that one. And then for the BuJo Buddies book club with Jashi Curran, we read Butcher and Blackbird by Bryn Weaver. For the Backlist book club with Covers with Cassidy, we read The Girl on the Mountain by Mark Lawrence. And for the Ketchup book club with Becca and the Books, we read A Little Hatred by Joe Abercrombie. Next up, Readathons. So I did participate in 3 readathons in February. The first one is Adventures in Aeldia, and again, I have 2 characters. So for Ariel, she had to go towards the maze and read a mystery or a thriller, and she read Butcher and Blackbird by Bryn Weaver. And for Karasu, he had to go towards and fight an animated gargoyle, and he had to read a book with non-human characters. And for that, he read The Book of Dragons by Edith Nesbit. Next up was Buzzwordathon with Kayla from Books and Lala, and of course Adventures in Aeldia is with Gia at Book Roast, our beloved magical readathon guru and creator. And for Buzzwordathon, the word for February was positive. And so you had to read a book with a positive word in the title, and I read 2 books for this one. The first one was The Last Hero by Terry Pratchett, and the second one was the amazing Maurice and His Educated Rodents, also by Terry Pratchett. And then the other readathon that I participated in was I didn't learn about the readathon until March, and so I kind of went back and fit my February books into the readathon. That is the Library of Dragons readathon, and I will leave all the information linked down below. And this was with Books to Ashes, and this was actually a readathon that started in November of last year, and then in March is a side quest. So you can do the side quests in any order, but you do need to do the chapters in order. So I went back and tried to fit my February books into chapter 1, which was the part of the readathon that was in November. And this is putting together your character and your dragon. And this is loosely based off of Dungeons and Dragons. So if you like those role-playing games and readathons, you'll love this one. So step 1, which is mandatory, you have to pick your color or the color of your dragon. So you need to read a book with dragons on the cover, set within the book or in the title. And this one was super easy. I read The Book of Dragons by Edith Nesbit and found out that my dragon, Quizri, which means champion of the green, is a green dragon. Dark green dragon with light sage accents. And then my character is Anator. That means protector of the forest. And my character is a gentle rider that loves the earth. Step 2, you have to pick your element. So my element is earth, and I had to read a classic or a nonfiction, which I did read both of those in February, or you could read a book about spring. So an earth dragon can create entire ecosystems and bring destroyed plant life back from the dead. And if the dragon is large enough, they can create an earthquake and split the ground apart. Which is kind of interesting, intriguing. My rival, so as an earth dragon, my rival dragon is an ice dragon. And for this, I read the Aenid by Virgil, which is a classic. Step 3, which is also mandatory, determines the size of your dragon. So you could get a small dragon that always stays small, like a little pint-sized dragon, or you can have a young dragon that will then grow as it ages in the future. So I ended up with a medium-sized dragon, so I've already had a little bit of a growth spurt, still has more room to grow as it ages, and currently can handle one single rider. And for this, I had to read a book between the 351 and 450 pages, and for that, I read BuJo and Blackbird by Bryn Reaver. So my dragon is currently a little shorter than me, because my dragon is a 5'6", but will grow as time goes on. Step 4, also mandatory, scales. What type of scales does your dragon have? So you can have scales, you can have feathers, and there's a couple other options on there. For me, I wanted scales, and that was to read a fiction, so your dragon has scales. And so I read The Bands of Mourning by Brandon Sanderson. Step 5 is an optional step. You do not need to do this one, but it is if your dragon has injuries at all. So the older your dragon is, the more likely it is to have some scars, maybe a limp or something like that, because it has seen battle. The older and wiser the dragon, the more battered and beaten it is. So for this one, you had to read a TBR vet, and that gives your dragon scars. The longer you've owned the book, the more scars it has. So if you've had the book for 10 years, it could have 10 scars. My book was only 2 years on my TBR, so my dragon has 2 scars, and the book I read was I Angel by C.J. Andrzejewski. So my dragon does have a scar near the eye and also on its back leg. Step 6, figuring out the gender of your dragon. So my dragon is a female, and if your book ended on an even number, it was a female. If it was an odd number, it was a male. Mine was a female. And I read The Girl and the Mountain by Mark Lawrence, which was 448 pages. Step 7, personality of your dragon. So if you have a 5-star book, then your dragon is brave, loyal, trustworthy, and very intelligent, always at your side, may secretly be a big cuddler. And so I had 2 5-star books for this month, so I definitely chose that one, and I used Kingfall by David Estes. Lastly is Readalongs. I had 3 readalongs for February. The first one was the Cosmere readalong, and that was going through all of the Cosmere books by Brandon Sanderson. And I'm happy to say I completed the Cosmere readalong. I was supposed to be done in January, but I didn't quite get to all of them, so I did finish them all up in February, and I read the last 2 books in the Mistborn Era 2 series, which was Bands of Mourning and The Lost Metal. And I'm still continuing around the Disc in 800 with literary diversions, and we're up to books 27 and 28, which was The Last Hero and The Amazing Maurice and His Educated Rodents. And then the last read-along is the Wheel of Time read-along with Sandra from Got a Thing for Things, and we read the 8th book in the Wheel of Time series, which is the Path of Daggers. And that is my stats and all my books for February wrap-up. And thank you so much for joining me. Please like, comment, and subscribe if you want it, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss any other videos from me. And if you made it this far in the video, leave a cat or a mouse emoji in the comments for The Amazing Maurice and His Educated Rodents. And until next time, keep reading. Bye!